Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Donna Conwell.
And my name is Kelly Seacat, and we're your hosts for Scratch Space.
Scratch Space is a virtual forum hosted by the Lucas Artist Residency Program at Montalvo Art Center, which is located in Saratoga, California, on the ancestral lands of the Ohlone people. With Scratch Space, we are bringing together visual artists, scholars, composers, activists, writers, and others to explore what kinds of radical imaginaries can unfold in this moment of pandemic, racial reckoning, economic uncertainty, civil unrest, and environmental crisis.
We're interested in exploring how we think about what is possible, how we can use our imaginations to build a better present and future, and how we can retool and create better and more equitable models of living and working together. So, Donna, tell us about today's program.
Today, we're going to be talking with disabled activist, media maker, and consultant Alice Wong about her work as founder and director of the Disability Visibility Project and her recently edited book, Disability Visibility, First-Person Stories from the 21st Century. We'll also be joined by visual artists Jason Lazarus and Siebren Versteeg, who will be talking about their recent project, Public Address, which is a nationwide virtual protest in support of Black Lives Matter that prioritizes the civic engagement of individuals who are immunocompromised and their caregivers, people with disabilities, and precarious community members. And we're going to be discussing tactics for making activism and protest accessible to all, and strategies for giving voice and visibility to communities at the margins, as well as how accessibility can be a form of creative practice as well as an act of love. And this conversation was recorded in November, shortly after the 2020 election, and we're very happy to be sharing it with you here today.
I'm excited for this conversation. You'll find the links to our guests' full bios are posted in the chat. I want to thank Nathan Zanon for being our producer behind the scenes. I will disappear shortly, and following the conversation with Alice, I'll return for a brief follow-on discussion between Donna, Jason Lazarus, and myself. Enjoy the program.
Okay, so let's start. So welcome, Alice and Jason, and thank you so much for joining us today. As I said, I've been looking forward to talking with you both very much, and I'm really excited for our conversation today. And we're recording this conversation in November, just shortly after the presidential election, but as you know, it's going to be broadcast in January, so just after the presidential inauguration. So I wanted to just start today by checking in with you both and to see how you're feeling post-election and just in general in response to this very uncertain and anxious time of COVID-19.
Jason, do you want to go first, and I'll go after you?
Okay. I was talking to Donna a little bit about this question, and I think the presidential election has me feeling like for a moment I'm not always 150% reactive alarmist to every single thing. I'm kind of thinking about the immediate fires that will continue, but also it's like a chance to think more aerially, right? To like kind of come out of the chaos of the present moment and start to anticipate sort of the possibilities and the new challenges that have to do with the election. I think that the election cloud, right, it is one thing. Yeah, I think there's a lot of feelings of thankfulness here in terms of, you know, a lot of our experiences are newly limited together. So I don't know. I feel newly appreciative and try to maintain presentness. What about you, Alice?
Well, I guess I wish I could feel the way you do. I mean, I think really the last 4 years, and way before that, right? Just it wasn't just the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many marginalized communities that have been harmed for decades, if not centuries. You know, this is just one of the most kind of very explicit forms of, you know, oppression that we've seen by the state. And, you know, it was a very close election. And the fact that there's still plenty of white people voting for an autocrat, for a fascist, and a racist, it doesn't make me feel any better. I think that's really important to remember. And that, you know, right now, even though this is being shown in January, you know, we should also think about how so many of our systems have been damaged to the fact that, you know, the validity of votes is being questioned. I think that to me is very disturbing. And, you know, even with the new administration, you know, I don't think it's going to be the answer. I don't think it's overnight. Everything's going to be better. You know, I think we have to remain really cautious and not too quick to celebrate. I think, you know, on the Saturday where it did seem like, you know, the electoral votes last Saturday, you know, it did seem like, you know, Joe Biden was the clear winner. You know, it was nice to celebrate. It was nice to take a moment to take a breath, to relax a little bit. But, you know, the work and the challenges to the results are right now happening. And hopefully in January, when people watch this video, the transition to power has gone smoothly. And that's my hope. But again, I think it's still really premature to be like to relaxed about everything, because we still have so many things that need to be rectified, and in addition to dealing with a pandemic that's just gone on uncontrolled.
Yeah, it's kind of reminding me, Jason, a little bit about when I first got to start working with you at the Lucas Artist Program in 2016, and it was right before that first, election. And your kind of response to that moment was to create this really amazing temporary inflatable monument where you were inviting the public to contribute texts and images, kind of responding to this question of who in your everyday life as we were heading into those 2016 elections, political story needed to be broadcast. Like, how do we give voice to those people whose futures were potentially the most precarious as we were heading into that new political reality? And it was like a very powerful project for that time, and feels very connected also to the work that you're doing now with public address and kind of giving voice and visibility again to people who may have been left out of conversations or just physically unable to participate. So I see that we're joined by Siebren, so I want to welcome Siebren. Thank you.
Thank you. So sorry I'm late. I got caught in crosstown traffic, literally.
No worries. We're very happy to have you with us. And maybe now would be a moment, Jason, and Siebren, to turn over to you to ask you to tell us a bit about your new project, public address.
Yeah, so I thought we had this unique local news coverage that I think is a really interesting way to kind of step into the project quickly. So here it is. I'm going to share my screen.
Protesters are going virtual now. Black Lives Matter Tampa will be using this platform for protesters who cannot join them out in the streets, like people battling COVID-19.
But the creators tell ABC Action News reporter J.J. Burton they are going to do this 24/7 until the November election.
For months, we've seen millions out in the streets marching, chanting, and demanding racial equality.
Think about all the people who, for a number of reasons, might not be able to protest physically on the street.
A lot of people battling COVID-19, the disabled, undocumented immigrants, parents without childcare, and many more. That's about to change. Check this out. It's a huge crowd of protesters marching. The only difference, they're in their house.
We're here to widen the possibility of participation and visibility.
USF professor Jason Lazarus, Professor Stephanie Seguco in California, and artist Siebren Versteeg in New York spent the last couple of months creating this virtual protest platform called Public Address. And it's real simple. Protesters will just use their phone to record themselves marching in place. For those who are wheelchair or bedbound, you can just hold up a sign and chant and send that in. The video will then be edited and put into a system with thousands.
The public will be able to log in at any time, day or night, and see the virtual protest happen.
Black Lives Matter Tampa will be the first organization to use the program when it launches in early August.
Our project isn't meant to replace physical protests, because in a way, they go hand in hand, and people really do need to show up.
In Tampa, J.J. Burton, ABC Action News.
Protesters.
So alongside this protest stream that between Stephanie and Siebren and I, we've started, there is a wrinkle, like the project has had a few growth moments. One is that initially we were really focused on folks who couldn't protest on the streets physically, and after getting some feedback, which was basically, people who can't protest on the streets didn't want to sort of be isolated like the other. It was like, just make a newly democratized space, right? And so we evolved the language to, actively court all participants from the whole spectrum, as opposed to singling anyone out. And I have a physical disability where I find myself that it's harder and harder to participate in physical protests like I have in the past. And we also started to expand the language because we realized after feedback that even the idea of submitting footage of folks marching in place was problematic. So, we started to think about the inclusion of stills or, bed-bound submissions, etc. And then the last thing I'll add quickly is one of the things we did at our launch, which was a really another sort of possibility of the platform we realized, is that we had a Zoom sort of interview with Black Lives Matter Tampa, similar to like when you're in a physical protest, there might be a moment of where people stop marching or gather in place and a megaphone is spoken through and or passed to different speakers. So we asked them to speak to the moment, talk about the activities and initiatives that they run that aren't normally covered in the media, to explain how to contribute. And then last, which I thought was super interesting, was when trying to figure out how to end this megaphone moment, I asked one of the lead organizers of Black Lives Matter Tampa, what is a question you wish you were asked? And she said, I wished I was asked what other things I wish I was doing. And I thought that was a real powerful way to get into the sort of cost of the lives of, you know, activists with real capital A activists who really put everything on the line, about, you know, all the other kind of paths that they're sacrificing, right? And so that's how we ended it. So in short, that's the project. That's an introduction to the project. Let me stop sharing here.
And Siebren, do you have anything to add that you'd like to add at this time? Oh yeah, I think you're on mute. Let's see if I can unmute you.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Hi. I think Jason's description of the project is pretty succinct. I was actually brought in a little bit later. Specifically, I was also interested in being more of a part of the activism that was happening this summer, and I was quarantining actually in a cabin upstate New York, pretty kind of out in the country. So for me, this was a way to be able to really engage and become a part of something I believed in, you know, from a distance. So yeah, I mean, I also come from a kind of a personal history of advocacy. Both my mother and my uncle were advocates and involved in rights for both people with obesity issues and handicapped issues as well. So it was a good fit, and Jason and I have been friends for a long time, and this was a really nice way to be able to collaborate on something I think we both believed in.
That's great, thank you. It's a great project, and we're going to link to it in the chat so folks can find out more and participate. One of the things your project made me think about was actually an essay in Alice's book that she's going to be talking about shortly, and it's called Disability Solidarity, Completing the Vision for Black Lives by Harriet Tubman Collective. And it talks about how when the Black Lives Matter movement first released their groundbreaking policy platform in 2016, it didn't mention anything about disability or ableism, despite the fact that the US Black community has a very high prevalence of disability. So I was just wondering, was that at all part of the conversation, Jason, that you guys were having with Black Lives Matter? Like, what was the shared interest in this project?
Well, the project came out of a workshop that was initially started in 2017 with Stephanie Suhuko, that her and I did at the University of South Florida. That was sort of about daydreaming tactics in physical protest signs. The workshop was like, let's for a minute remove the kind of constraints or the pressures of the social issues, and just in this workshop try to innovate and think critically about, like, what is a protest sign? What are the possibilities of walking around with an object that's meant to be photographed, that has to do with representation and visibility and kind of nuancing and speaking out to the grand democratic experiment. And then we were asked to redo the project at the University of Houston, and COVID hit. And that COVID wrinkle is really what started this. So we have COVID plus the fact that, you know, at the moment of George Floyd's murder, there was just amazing street energy. And I was delighted that in the greater Tampa Bay region really came out strong. And, you know, then the opportunity to think about, well, who are the folks who wish they could be here and for a number of reasons can't, or wish they could stay longer, or, you know, let's ask ourselves, what are all the vulnerabilities or precarities, right? All the forms of violence or structural, you know, political, that keep people away from one form of protest, but it's highly, you know, highly broadcast, unlike many other forms of activism and protest, which are much less visible or broadcast to mainstream audiences.
Thank you. So,
yeah, I'll just say one thing really quick. And, you know, when Stephanie and I were thinking about the project and how to change it over, it was Siebren's work that was uniquely technological and felt very, the technology that he employed circled back to the analog, to me, to the human. And so that's why when we were thinking about the shift to digital, we thought, let's reach out to Siebren, you know, and that's kind of, he had been doing this work for, you know, 15 years. So we were lucky that he would even think to kind of come in and sort of open up some of his long arc of knowledge for this new tactic.
It's wonderful. So Alice, I'd love to turn to you now, if we could. I first came upon Alice's work listening to the podcast Irresistible, which used to be called Healing Justice, and that led me to discover Alice's work as founder of the Disability Visibility Project and her podcast. And I've been really learning so much and recognizing all of how much more I need to confront the world, how the world that we live in is really inherently ableist, and trying to figure out how to be a better ally in that regard. And so I'm so thrilled that you've joined us in conversation today, and that you're willing to share with our audiences the work that you're doing with the Disability Visibility Project and your book, which came out this year. And so, you know, would you tell us a bit about the work that you're doing?
Thank you so much for having me. Before I talk about my book, I just would love to kind of respond to what Jason and Siebren shared about activism, if that's all right.
Of course.
You know, I would have to say that I'd like to kind of offer counterpoints that I don't think that on the ground activism or marches or rallies are the most visible, or the ones that get the most kind of attention. I think definitely in the last, 5-10 years, because of the internet and social media, there are so many different ways to show up, to organize and mobilize. That's just as real as the things that are happening in physical spaces. So I really want to kind of gently push back on this idea, or the idea of a march itself. I think, or my own perspective, many of these kinds of rallies and marches are important and symbolic, but they're oftentimes really for the individual experience. They'll be saying something and doing something, but I also think, how does that, what is the next step? I think it's, what does it really change? What changes? And I do think that that's my own kind of maybe side eye towards these kinds of events where, yes, it does get a lot of media coverage. Yeah, that is important. But for me, change is very much more long term and incremental. It has to be systemic and clearly organized with the most marginalized in mind. So, I don't think it's either or, but I do want to push back on the idea that online activism is less apparent or less powerful. We need all types. So I'm in total agreement, and I'm, delighted to see different ways to bring in people no matter what space it is. So, giving people a chance to march virtually is fantastic. But I think also with any sort of digital or online form of activism, I'm also curious from Jason and Siebren also about the accessibility of their work. One thing I've learned from other disabled people is that, there's a lot of images and videos showed or just different kinds of online artwork or installations, but they don't come with audio descriptions. They don't come with image descriptions. And I think that's interesting that in an attempt to create access to include people, that inadvertently a lot of artwork and things that are posted online actually exclude people as well. So I think that's something that I hope audience members who are artists and part of the arts community, think a lot, especially museums and galleries where, visual culture is so centered and privileged that we kind of forget about all the different ways that people are left out of the experience of enjoying art. You have to be mindful of that because, I'm not perfect, but in my own activism and media work, I try to do my best. My podcast is, not just audio, but it has a text transcripts, it has image descriptions, and, I share it as many different platforms. And this is based on the feedback from other people I know throughout the community. And it does bother me that the media makers and artists don't think about their access as a form of creative practice that is actually generative to create and build in access. And I think that there's a lot of curators who should really, be engaged and should be engaged in this kind of conversation since disabled artists and, people who want to be in this space have been excluded historically. But there's still, I think, a lot of disabled artists who struggle to get the recognition and to be, of interest by the whole artist, by the whole gallery, museum kind of world. But yeah, so my book, Disability, Visibility is kind of an offering to the world. It's, an anthology featuring 37 first-person stories by disabled people intersectized in the 21st century. So these are stories published from the year 2000 to 2019. And for me, I think it's really important that we kind of document and, curate a reflection of disabled people and their lived experience and the culture of disability. And again, this is, a small snapshot of people and issues and communities that I care about. So, even though I'm not a curator in the sense of, being at a museum, but I do think my role as an editor definitely has a similar curatorial kind of eye and perspective because I was very intentional about centering disabled people of color who are definitely left out and not represented, especially, let's just say, especially in the art world. There's a phrase, nothing about us without us. And I think we kind of still forget how overwhelmingly white is this gender and, very much centered on this very narrow idea of what disability looks like. So that is one of the reasons behind my book is to show the breadth and the beauty and the variety of our culture. And I would say culture as it cultures the communities because we're part of every single community. So that's kind of the thinking behind it. The fact that mostly marginalized disabled people really understands the way systems work, and the way oppression work, and I think for many cases we're the ones with the solutions as well.
Yeah, I have some. Thank you so much, Alice. And I have some thoughts that I'd like to share with you, but I also want to give Jason and Siebren an opportunity if you want to respond to anything that Alice has said.
I think those are all really great points. I completely agree with you, and I think that part of the act of making and the act of producing is to learn, and this has been an incredibly eye-opening experience. Just a few months into it already, and I think the work continues, and we've been confronting more and more kind of different ways of contending with different submissions or people's ways to engage or desire to engage with the project, and trying to find different ways to accommodate different perspectives and different ways to have a different way to even present this idea of a march or of a protest in general. I also feel very strongly about the potential for digital protest and protest in social media space. I think it's something that it's really kind of unfortunate that people, I guess it has a lot to do with the expected or implied short attention span of social media, that it's unfortunate to see how quickly people kind of bend and give up and go back to their old habits before really being able to see the possibility of making change and seeing it through. Happens often, and that's something I've been thinking about, or how to try to inspire people to kind of stick with their guns when we all sort of participate in terms of a mass kind of way to interact with social media. I also am, of course, always concerned and suspect to relying so heavily on the participation and time and energy of others, to make to help to make an artwork. So, these are definitely, topics and sensitivities that I think Jason, Stephanie, and I are all definitely looking into and thinking about a lot, as much as we can.
There's something that comes to mind. I did a group portrait in Chicago in 2015, which asked anyone who considered themselves an artist to come sit for a portrait. And it was through that experience that this idea that every time, being trained in photography too, like every framed image, every image is violent because it has edges, right? That take it out of context from the world, right? So every time you have representation, right, you have some like beginning of an image field and the end of an image field, you have violence, right? Anytime you have a gate or a filter, an opportunity. So it is a little bit of a circular issue in a sense, right? That every time you work to bring someone or something into the fold, it's like, what are the limits of the medium that then dictate that someone else is not included? So I think like a lot of art projects, this starts with this question of what if, and which I think drives a lot of art projects. And then, this is a project that's public, so, technical wrinkles, conceptual wrinkles, disclusion are part of like a public process, right? Which, you know, at that point we become listeners rather than architects. So I guess back to Siebren's point, like it continues. Sound is something we've never had in. Image descriptions are this idea of sort of a flow of image descriptions is really rich. And so like that's a technical opportunity. It's a conceptual opportunity.
Yeah, and I think this makes me think about the disabled artist I really want to mention. Her name is Shannon Finnegan, and she is a disabled artist, and she has an entire project called Alt Text as Poetry. And she really invites other artists and, you know, creators to think about the creation of alt text as more than just a obligation or something that you are forced to do,
Right.
but as a form of
another dimension of the understanding of publishing even.
And another really interesting way to connect the work of the actual subject or work to these words. And I think that's, you know, what it's all about. So I think I would encourage anyone to look up Shannon's work, which is really, I think, groundbreaking and important. And, you know, for any artist or, I mean, for any, you know, curator or somebody that's in the museum world to also think about the disabled curators that are out there. There's actually, you know, people who are doing really fascinating work, including Dr. Amanda Kashia, Cachia, who's based in Southern California, who's actually editing a volume titled Curating Access, to look at the ways different artists and curators are really embedding access as part of their work. So those would be my two shout outs if anyone's interested.
That's very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. We can post those into the chat as well. Was that the curator that you had a conversation with recently, Alice, on your podcast?
Yes, that is a recent episode.
Yeah, so we'll post a link to that as well, because I think that will be very interesting for everyone to access. And you know, I'd love for us, all these questions you were kind of raising about curatorial work, and being the editor of an anthology is absolutely that. It's like bringing together voices, and how do you choose those voices? And thinking about our work, Kelly and my work at the residency program, who are those people around the table and how do they get there? So, and I'd love for us to talk more about that, and perhaps we could save some of that to the end and bring Kelly back on and talk a bit more about that. But I'd like to just move now, if we could, to talk a little bit more about this role of stories and the role they play in kind of allowing us to imagine what's possible. And, you know, I was thinking about, I'm not sure that you mentioned this in the description, Jason, but you're also collecting this archive of conversations as part of this project, correct? And so thinking about this process of archiving and collecting stories, and of course, Alice, your work obviously is so much about storytelling, and your work with oral histories with the StoryCorps project. So I'd just like to, I guess I have two questions about stories for all of you, and that is, you know, what are the stories that have affected you most in your life? And the second question is sort of, again, going back to the earlier point that you were raising, Alice, about how divided we obviously are at the end of this election process. Like, what is this shared story? What's the story that's going to get us to a more just vision and inclusive vision for us? And you can answer both, or you can answer one, you know, whatever feels most interesting to you. Do you want to go, Jason?
Well, I'll start with this idea of we feel culpable when we feel moved. And that's such a sort of seed for so many things. So I think, I guess, like, I was sort of reflecting back on this question, having a congenital birth defect. I think the world is telling you stories as you try to navigate it, right? The way people look at you, the way I often felt like I was a witness, not a participant, especially early on in life. So some of the stories that affected me were just having that embodied experience, and not really feeling different until the world told me I was different. And then the other thing I was thinking about was growing up in a Jewish family and this sort of perennial of the, I'm getting some feedback. I don't know if you guys can hear that.
Yeah, we can hear a little bit. Is that coming from you or is it one of us?
I can mute.
Growing up with like the Holocaust as a strong figure, right? As a young person, and so having not only sort of a personal, I don't want to say crisis, but like a personal differentiated journey, and then having this sort of societal, like, kind of never forget story that I was, brought into me very young. And then, going back to that idea of we feel culpable when we feel moved, right? So I kind of had what I felt was like an individual story, or the stories I was receiving, and then the sort of cultural story that I was hearing. And then, later in life, looking at artists who, again, ask this question perennially, what if, right? And getting into spaces that where they're endeavoring to leap forward or over problems, right? Or create different frameworks to ask questions that might have a new set of parameters, a new set of like opportunities, intellectual arcs, visual language that might not look familiar. So those are some of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I would say that right now, the stories that move me are the stories that are coming out of the pandemic by predominantly disabled, sick, and immunocompromised people. The fact that for so long, our wisdom and our expertise has been pretty much ignored and erased. But the fact that, we're oracles. I gave a talk earlier this summer to actually an artistic group in Australia, of all places, to where they asked me to give a keynote to imagining what's speaking as if I'm talking to the year 2029. And I talked about how disabled people have been oracles for eternity since the beginning of time. But the fact that continually people don't listen to us, that don't heed our warnings, that I do feel like in this particular time period, there are so many stories by disabled people that are harbingers of what's to come, but also in a sense welcoming to the whole new group of millions of people that have to deal with the very long-lasting effects of surviving this, virus. To the fact that our community is going to be completely altered because of this pandemic. That it's going to broaden, it's going to include so many new people that whether they identify as disabled or not, using the word the D word, they're both definitely part of our community. Yeah, because they have pre-existing conditions. They most definitely, at least in the United States, are considered a person with a disability under protections of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I think, to me, the stories that we've always shared for a long time on surviving and thriving can really apply to so many people that are struggling now, that are entering this new phase of their life, which, it can be very fraught. So those are the stories that move me, and those are the ones that I'm trying to amplify and share and document as well.
I forgot to unmute myself, sorry. Thank you, Alice. Siebren, do you have anything you'd like to respond to with that question?
I don't know if I have an answer to address right now, but I think for me, the past 6-7 months have just been there's been a lot of learning, and I've been really amazed and to realize how wrapped up the COVID situation is with comorbidity and systemic racism in this country. I think it's been a really amazing period of exposure of a lot of things that were previously unnoticed by me and I think a lot of other people.
Yeah, it can unravel certain narratives.
Yeah.
And an opportunity to start hopefully constructing some better ones.
Yeah.
So I wanted to also ask you about sharing the platform and what do because both you all work very collaboratively and you're interested in advocating for others. So I wanted to ask you about why that was important to you, and maybe Alice, I don't know if it would make sense in this context, but it would be interesting to hear about your whole work with advocacy project of Crypt the Vote and and your work as an activist there. But you could also talk about it in any other way that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I mean, since we're kind of touching on the election and stuff like that, I could definitely share a little bit about Crypt the Vote, which is a nonpartisan online movement encouraging the political participation of disabled people. And this was started in 2016 with my co-partners Greg Barrington and Andrew Paulray. And, basically the three of us have never met in real life, in person. We're all scattered all over the country. And we know each other, we've been friends, and, we noticed during the 2016 election, there were a lot of candidates and very little discussion about the disability issues or even the fact that the disabled people are actually voting, a community worth doing outreach and, a community that should be considered in their campaigns. So, with the three of us, we don't have a nonprofit, which is individuals, and we're like, well, we have Twitter, we could use social media. This is something that's readily, at our hands. And we thought, let's try to create an online community. And I came up with the hashtag Crypt the Vote. And for those who are unfamiliar with the term crypt, this is very much a reclaiming of a slur, that's historically been used, but it's been taken back by some disabled people, not all. Don't want to be upfront about that. So when I say crip culture, or to crip a space, to use as a verb, I'm talking about really imbuing it with the perspectives and politics and kind of the location of disabled people, like centering it on disabled people with everything that's entailed by it. And in many ways, to radicalize and transform it. Because, in my opinion, the crip identity, or the word crip, is very much this, politicized perspective that we are a community with a history, with multiple movements, and we've been pretty much systemically excluded. So it's more than just what's wrong with our bodies, but much more about a community-based perspective. So I curated that hashtag as a way for people to find each other, a way for us to gather asynchronously. Like, you don't have to be together at the same time using the tag. It's there for anybody who wants to use it. It was very slow. Like, we started with a live tweet of a Democratic debate in 2016. Here we are in 2020. We've had over 50 organized Twitter chats. We had 2 Twitter town halls with presidential candidates, Pete Buttigieg and Senator Elizabeth Warren earlier this year. So in many ways, we have created a huge amount of visibility from the internet, and people are actually, it's resonating with a lot of people. People are following the tag. It means something to people. We don't own the tag. The tag is used by all kinds of people. That's what it's like creating an work of art, right? You release it out to the world. You have no control over how people are going to interpret it, but it's there as an offering. And to be, what's really beautiful is that, this is very much something that disabled people find useful. And that it is a place where people feel seen and heard. And that to me is really exciting.
Yeah, it's an amazing project. Jason, do you have anything you want to say about collaboration and advocacy?
I think simply that
sharing the platform.
Yeah, well, I think working collaboratively happened, I don't know, maybe like 5 years after I started making work post grad school. And I think at a certain point, maybe you've looked, I felt like I'd looked inward enough, and I was interested in sort of interdependent projects and being put in a position to learn in public, to have to adjust and be challenged. Mm-hmm. So, which very much continues with this project.
Yeah. So in a kind of previous conversation that Jason and I had, Jason's been reading and thinking a fair amount about access intimacy, and we know also that relates to another project that you're working on, Alice, Access is Love. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that now, and at this time also ask Kelly if she would rejoin us so she can like participate in this last segment of our conversation. So I don't know who would like to begin. If Alice, you want to talk, do you want to start by talking about access as love, and Jason, maybe you can respond because I know you've been really thinking about it.
Yeah, I just want to preface that access intimacy is a concept and a term coined by Mia Minkus. So I think it's really important to cite Mia Minkus for this work, this intellectual work. Access and love is a collaboration between Mia Minkus and Sandy Ho. The three of us are disabled Asian American women and femmes. And the phrase access is love emerged out of a keynote that Mia gave 2 years ago, where she says, access is a form of love. And this line in particular really just resonated deeply with me. I think it really identified all of my feelings about accessibility, and I think it was such a brilliant and really simple and direct phrase. So Sandy, me and I, we had some conversations about how do we build on this, it was a keynote, which is great, but what do we do together to really advance this idea? So, you see Sandy Ho's website. Sandy is the organizer and creator of the Disability and Intersectionality Summit. It's a summit that takes place in Boston every 2 years. There was supposed to be one this year, 2020, but it was postponed. But there were two summits in the last 6 years. So, Sandy's websites, we created a tab for Access is Love, and we basically included a lot of resources. And we also created gear, which created all kinds of swag with the phrase access is love, the phrase disability justice is love, the phrase solidarity is love, because those were the messages that the BA gave in that keynote. And it's really to put our culture out there, both visually through t-shirts, mugs, and tote bags that supports the work of all the proceeds to support the work of our projects, but also, the fact that we have a compiled list of references to resources to really help people who don't know where to start, to start kind of integrating access in their everyday lives. And there's a lot of ways to do it, very simple things to just very more complex things. So, yeah, I think it's something that we feel like it's a collective practice. It is not just the burden or the legal responsibility of the state or organizations or employers. It's something that we all have the capacity to do for one another.
Yes, it's very powerful to think of it as a way of loving in the world. Jason, I'd like to bring you in here now too.
Yeah, so I have Mia's blog up in another browser, and for anyone, I'll just read a couple passages from it. She writes, access intimacy is that elusive, hard to describe feeling when someone else gets your access needs, the kind of eerie comfort that your disabled self feels with someone on a purely access level. Sometimes it can happen with complete strangers, disabled or not, or sometimes it can be built over years. in my life, access intimacy is something that has been hard won, organic, or at times even felt magical. It has taken me by surprise, showing up with people that I never would have expected to have that kind of access connection with. So I think why reading Mia's scholarship was paradigm shifting. It really changed the way that I thought about how feelings of as she said, sort of steeling yourselves for encounters versus feeling light, light and open. That your relationship with family and friends, like relationships where you think access intimacy would maybe naturally spill out of, necessarily don't. And opposite, sometimes you find yourself connecting with someone almost immediately on this level without any, words or labor, right? That there's like a shared understanding. So, okay, that for me is like how I understand the concept and how it sort of made me think about all the relationships in my life where access intimacy felt effortless. And then where I question, like, why don't I feel that after having so much, experience with, friend or family person, right? And so then flipping the script is always like, okay, when am I not that person, for, as a bridge to the access intimacy for somebody else. And that's how it's been sort of paradigmatic for me and a sort of rhetorical device going forward.
Yeah. Very powerful. So Kelly, I want to give you an opportunity to respond just before we wrap up today. And yeah.
So thank you for being with us today. And Jason, for the work you do. We've had you in the residency, we've worked with you. And I love kind of ending on this idea. Throughout the pandemic, I feel like we've been encouraged, challenged, and really wanted to look at, accessibility. It's an important piece for Montalvo, and where does that fit? And thinking about it in kind of the movement of Black Lives Matter, and thinking about it with who's welcome in our venue when we're there on site, who's welcome in that park, who's that park made for. And this really pushes both Donna and I to think more deeply about the entire program and what that looks like in terms of accessibility. That idea of access as love, I know if Angela was sitting here, would resonate with her, and access intimacy and what that means. We had a lot of conversations in the summer with artists of color who were willing to come into this space of radical imagination with us, and really wanted to talk about how can we start embodying each other. And this makes me think of that. How do we start sort of having that sense of humanity for each other and really embodying that experience? So I just want to thank you both. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's been really exciting to meet you, Alice, and to have you with us, Jason.
Well, I know, Alice, that you have to leave for another meeting, and I want to be respectful of that. So I just want to thank you, all of you, so much for participating in this conversation with us today. And I hope, we can continue to be in touch, and we will share all of the resources that you've mentioned in our chat. And thank you all.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.
A treat.
All right, take care.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Yeah, I think we could have talked so much more, but I knew that Alice had to leave, so felt that just had to be what it was. And I think we got quite a lot in for the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks so much.
Are there any last thoughts, Jason, that you have? I mean, a million, and then.
Yeah, I mean, it's humbling to be around someone like Alice. I mean, she's truly like an activist, and I feel like our wondering what if project, you know, shares and then definitely diverges from kind of like the hardcore work that she's doing. And I was talking to Stephanie about this, which is sort of this idea that, for example, well, one thing I wish we had gotten to talk about, I didn't even really think about it, is like that we have sort of like, or Siebren's expressed interest in sharing the algorithm so it can be kind of like a shareware at some point. I think we're trying to figure out the projects and how to use the algorithms first, so that we could actually support people who want to do their own sort of endless streams, if you will. Yeah, but there's a lot to think about. And I also think
I think it's important, the work, you know, creating that space, creating that work, trying to make new ways for people to engage and participate. I think that's always important. And the limitations, you know, it's a little bit like being white at this moment of Black Lives Matter. We're always going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So creating access, you know, how I think about Montalvo, and we can keep this or not, but you know, it's a hard place to navigate. And so making sure it's accessible is always, you know, we've got to stretch and that's an important work for us as an organization, but I feel like there's always some place where you're going to learn, you're going to fail, you're going to learn. And sort of that ability to sort of support each other through that is important.
Yeah, I think one of the nice things thinking about Montalvo is that because Montalvo, when you're there, feels so like a firewall around you, like a protective firewall. There's a lot of space there, physically and emotionally, and food-wise.
That's important.
Yeah, you know, I guess like one of the things that makes access so interesting to think about it is because one of the things that Montalvo does is it like, in some ways, it really keeps the world at bay for a minute, which is like a big sort of, like the better it does that, the more these questions become important. So just to remind you guys that, yes, those questions are sort of infinite, but having been a resident, you know, is a privilege, and you do feel like you have space. It's the opposite of the real world in a great way.
It's our own little bubble.
Yeah. So it's important to kind of think about like that mission, right? Because I think it's what artists crave is like, just keep the world at bay for a minute so I can focus and work on something or do experiments. So yeah, so kind of keeping that in relationship to access, right? And it's like that's the sort of, I don't know, dovetail or interlocking piece is in why that access and always reimagining like what does access mean and what does equity mean is so important because, you know, walking into that threshold is so exciting as an artist. So it's a good thing to keep in mind for these infinite sort of work to be done.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it adds more to this kind of ongoing conversation, right, Kelly, that as we think through these questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool. I want to call Siebren because I want to ask him too. Like, I don't know. I feel like we have new things to talk about. So I kind of want to get him while he's fresh.
Well, that's good. That's always a good thing to
You
do.
go and call him. It's terrific to see you.
Yeah, you guys too. It really means a lot to me. And especially, I don't know, at the end of a week, it feels like nice to be pulled into this. It's like, because otherwise you're just sort of rattling off your to-do list. And I don't know, these are always like a chore to get started, but then at the end you're so excited about, you know, the kind of, it's like, it's not even easy work to get these things together meaningfully. So, and Donna, thanks for entertaining my like questions about the questions and like trying to figure out a different way in.
It was great. It was very helpful to have had that conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Hugs.
Hugs.
Infinite hugs, guys. Check in anytime.
Thank you again for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our Scratch Space conversation. Kelly, can you tell us what we have coming up next in Scratch Space?
Absolutely. Thank you, Donna. February 11th, we'll be talking with the performing artist, spoken word poet, actor, and musician, Dalek Brathwaite. We'll be learning about his current work transforming the performative work, adapting history into a film. Adapting history, originally commissioned for a youth audience, is an oral telling of the complex histories of our nation through American music. Hope you'll join us.
Looking forward to seeing you there. Thanks again, and bye for now.
Thank you.